The air vibrates with the roar of cannons and the crunch of the earth beneath the relentless advancing tanks. Cities crumble in silence, and the smoke of destruction spreads like a gray shroud over the steppe. Amid this chaos, there is an even deadlier silence, that of someone lurking in the shadows, patient, precise, invisible. There, among ruins and trenches, a young woman decided to write her name with every shot, defying death and destiny itself. In the heat of World War II, while entire armies clashed and strategic maps were stained with blood, a figure emerged that changed the perception of courage and precision in combat. To her comrades, she was an example of bravery and determination. To her enemies, an impossible-to-hit specter. And to history, a sniper who would mark a before and after in the war. Who was this woman who took up a rifle and faced death face to face? What drove her to defy the most extreme dangers of the Eastern Front? How did she manage to survive and at the same time leave an indelible mark on the memory of the war? From the fields of Odessa to the ruins of Sevastopol, every shot was an act of resistance, every silence a reminder of her lethal skill. It wasn't just marksmanship. It was intelligence, patience, strategy, and courage that seemed almost supernatural amid the daily horror. Her comrades admired her, her enemies feared her, and she knew that every life saved, every mission accomplished, was a silent yet decisive contribution to the defense of her homeland. The story of this young woman reminds us that heroism can arise in the most unexpected places, and that war knows no gender. Her life invites us to ask, how far can human determination go? What inner strength drives someone to face an apparently invincible enemy? How can individual acts of courage change the course of history? When the bullets fell silent, her legacy remained. Her story is not only that of a sniper, but of a woman who defied the limits of fear, death, and expectation, showing that even in the darkest times, bravery can shine with eternal intensity. This is the story of someone who turned uncertainty and danger into legend, who took a rifle and turned it into an instrument of courage, and who continues to inspire those who believe that determination and valor can change the world. The year is 1941. The Soviet Union stands on the edge of the abyss. From dawn, the sky seems to tremble with the roar of enemy planes flying overhead, while columns of black smoke rise from bombed cities and ravaged villages. The streets, once full of life, are now silent, interrupted only by the echo of distant explosions and the cries of those trying to escape the chaos. Entire families hide in basements and improvised shelters, while uncertainty and fear spread like a gray shroud over the entire country. Each day seems longer than the last, and despair seeps into the smallest corners of daily life. Empty markets, factories that no longer produce, trains full of refugees fleeing eastward. Amid this storm, millions of citizens hear the call to defend their homeland. Men and women, young and old, know that the fate of their land depends on every decision, every act of bravery, and that history itself is being written with blood and sacrifice. Fear and hope coexist side by side. Some tremble at the magnitude of the invasion, while others feel that there has never been a more crucial moment to demonstrate courage. Among all this crowd, a young woman walks through the devastated streets, observing the rubble, the destroyed buildings, and the exhausted faces of her fellow citizens. She does not yet know that her life is about to change forever, that her skills, determination, and willpower will be tested in ways she cannot even imagine. Every shadow moving among the ruins, every distant echo of an explosion seems to whisper that her destiny and that of her homeland are inseparably connected. Amid despair and uncertainty, the story of a woman who will become a symbol of courage and precision in the midst of chaos begins to take shape. A life marked by the cruelest war the world has ever known. Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko was born on July 12, 1916, in Bila Tserkva, a small Ukrainian town that at the time was part of the vast and turbulent Russian Empire. It was a time marked by uncertainty and violent change. The entire country seemed to tremble under the weight of its own destiny. The daughter of a working-class family, Lyudmila grew up in an environment where the word sacrifice was not an abstraction but a daily reality. Her childhood was shaped by the echoes of the end of the empire, the tensions of the Bolshevik Revolution, and the birth of a new political experiment, the Soviet Union, which promised a different future, though one full of challenges and contradictions. Her father, Mikhail Pavlichenko, was an industrial worker, a man of firm character shaped by physical labor and a military background that had instilled discipline and a sense of duty. Her mother, Elena, was a teacher, a woman of clear ideas, convinced that education was the safest path to dignity and progress. In that home, where work mingled with books and rigor with tenderness, Lyudmila learned three things from an early age that would mark her destiny: the importance of study, the value of discipline, and a deep sense of patriotic duty. From a young age, Lyudmila stood out for unusual determination. She was not a docile or fearful child. She was competitive, direct, and ambitious. If she set her mind to something, she pursued it to the end. Her strong character contrasted with her calm appearance. Behind her dark eyes lay a will of iron. In a time when women were often relegated to passive roles, she unknowingly challenged the norms of her era. The anecdote that would mark the beginning of her legend occurred during her adolescence. A group of boys mocked her when she expressed her desire to practice sport shooting. To them, that was a man's activity reserved for soldiers or hunters. But Lyudmila was not intimidated. Their teasing ignited a spark of pride in her that would become a flame. She not only decided to learn to shoot, but also set a goal that few could have imagined: to be the best. At the age of 14, she joined a local shooting club. It was there that, for the first time, she felt the cold weight of a rifle in her hands. It was not a toy or a passing curiosity. It was an instrument of precision, concentration, and absolute control. Every shot demanded calm. Every target was a test of patience and self-discipline. While other girls her age dreamed of dances, dresses, or foreign fashions arriving from Paris or Berlin, Lyudmila dreamed of perfect aim, of hitting targets almost invisible at a distance. With each practice session, her determination became more evident. It was not only about hitting a target, it was about mastering herself. She saw shooting as a spiritual discipline, a form of active meditation. Her progress was so rapid that she soon earned the respect and also the envy of her male peers. Among the instructors, her name began to be mentioned with admiration. Her character distinguished her from the others. She spoke little, but when she aimed, she never missed. During her youth, Lyudmila alternated her studies with shooting practice. Her mother insisted that she not neglect her education, and Lyudmila complied rigorously. She was interested in history, in the formation of nations, in the social movements that had shaken Europe in recent decades. She was fascinated by ideas of transformation and justice, but more than words, actions mattered to her. In 1937, at just 21 years old, Lyudmila made a crucial decision. She moved to Kyiv to study history at the National University. There, in the silent hallways and classrooms, filled with young people eager to understand their country, she began building her dream of becoming an academic and researcher. She wanted to dedicate her life to studying the past, unraveling the processes that had shaped her nation. She was drawn to biographies of great historical figures, accounts of wars and revolutions. But the history she had admired in books would soon reach her with a brutal reality that no text could anticipate. In 1941, the entire world changed course. Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in history. More than 3 million German soldiers, supported by tanks, artillery, and planes, crossed the Soviet border. Within weeks, the skies of the East were filled with smoke, the fields with fire, and the cities with ruins. Ukraine, Lyudmila's homeland, became an inferno of fire and steel. At that moment, Lyudmila was in her final year of university. Her life seemed set. An academic career, a thesis to write, a future among archives and libraries. She could have stayed in Kyiv, sought refuge, or even fled east, like so many others trying to escape the German war machine. But she did not. The same determination that had driven her to challenge the boys at the shooting club years before reappeared. This time, the challenge was not a stationary target on a bullseye. It was the defense of her country, her people, and everything she believed in. She decided to enlist voluntarily in the Red Army. Her motivation was not glory or hatred, but something deeper. The conviction that knowledge without action is worthless when the homeland is in danger. When she arrived at the recruitment office, the officers looked at her skeptically. She was young, slender, with a serene face and polished manners. They thought she would fit better as a nurse, helping in field hospitals. But Lyudmila refused categorically. She took her shooting notebook from her bag, placed it on the table, looked the officer in the eye, and said firmly, "I am a trained sniper. I want a rifle." That phrase would mark the beginning of her legend. She was assigned to the 25th Infantry Regiment of the Red Army, where for the first time, her skill would be tested under real conditions. She was given a Mosin-Nagant bolt-action rifle, equipped with a Soviet telescopic sight, and sent to the Southern Front, where the war was decided meter by meter, hill by hill. In those Ukrainian fields, among dust, fear, and the metallic smell of gunpowder, Lyudmila Pavlichenko began her true transformation, from student to hunter of enemies. Each day on the front was a lesson in survival. The air was thick with tension, shots echoed in the distance, and death lingered in every trench. But she remained calm, observing through her scope, breathing slowly, waiting for the right moment. She was no longer just a historian studying the great conflicts of the past. She was a living protagonist of history being written in blood and fire. The young woman with a steady gaze, who once dreamed of books and classrooms, became a symbol of courage. And although she did not yet know it, her name would be forever etched in the annals of World War II as one of the deadliest and most admired snipers of all time. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had crossed the threshold. She was no longer observing history. She was writing it with every shot. Key battles and evolution. The summer of 1941 was a point of no return for Europe, and in particular for the young Soviet woman Lyudmila Mikhailovna Pavlichenko. It was the season when her destiny until then tied to books and study, transformed into fire, steel, and survival. The Eastern Front burned with an intensity the world had never seen. Operation Barbarossa had unleashed a war storm that devastated entire towns, devouring lives and hopes. The enemy, the Nazi army, advanced like an unstoppable machine, crushing everything in its path with a ferocity that seemed endless. Amid that devastation, a woman barely 24 years old prepared to face hell for the first time. Her baptism by fire began in Odessa, a strategic port city on the Black Sea, known for its cultural mix, rebellious character, and history of resistance. But that summer, Odessa was no longer a cheerful port. It was a besieged fortress. Bombs fell day and night. The air smelled of gunpowder and fear, burnt oil and broken promises. Sirens were the prelude to horror, and ruins were the daily landscape. It was there that Lyudmila Pavlichenko took up her Mosin-Nagant rifle in combat for the first time. The same one she had trained with for years, but now with an infinitely harsher purpose: kill or be killed. Her first day in combat marked the beginning of her legend. 2 shots, 2 enemy lives extinguished, 2 fewer threats for her comrades. That morning, amid dust and the echoes of artillery, Lyudmila realized something profound. In war, there is no turning back. That first day, the dry sound of the bolt, the rifle's recoil, and the silence after the shot were the baptism of a new identity. The young history student had stopped observing the past to become part of it. The Soviet officers could not believe it. On a front dominated by men hardened by war, a woman, small, focused, relentless, displayed a cold-bloodedness that many soldiers did not possess. Her shots were clean, precise, and deadly. She did not tremble, hesitate, or miss. Her surgical accuracy impressed everyone, and her ability to remain calm under enemy fire puzzled even the veterans. Soon, rumors spread through the trenches like a wind of hope. "The girl who never misses," they said. It was a nickname born from astonishment and respect, whispered as if speaking it aloud might break the spell. For 70 days, Odessa withstood the siege. 70 days of unrelenting fire, sleepless nights, bodies covered in mud and shrapnel. The Nazis, supported by their Romanian allies, attacked with fury, sending wave after wave of infantry and aerial bombardments that turned neighborhoods into rubble. But among the debris, among the shadows moving like ghosts, Lyudmila Pavlichenko prowled. She moved silently, invisibly, always seeking the vantage point from which she could see without being seen. She observed enemy observers, artillerymen and snipers threatening her comrades. She hunted them one by one, patient like a silent predator. In just over 2 months of combat, her personal tally rose to more than 180 confirmed kills. That figure, which might seem cold, was in reality a measure of her dedication. Every shot represented more than an enemy downed. It meant a Soviet life saved, a position protected, an advance halted. Her marksmanship had become a form of language, a silent but powerful declaration of resistance. Her reputation grew so much that commanders entrusted her with an additional task: training new snipers. There was no formal school, no manual, no time for practice. But Lyudmila, with her patience and precision, became an improvised teacher. She taught recruits how to blend into their surroundings, how to merge with the landscape until they disappeared, how to listen to the battlefield, the crunch of a boot, the whiz of a shell, the silence before an attack. She also taught the hardest lesson: the patience to wait for hours without moving, the serenity to shoot only when necessary. However, Odessa's heroic resistance could not last forever. The German and Romanian forces, superior in number and armament, broke through the defenses. The city fell. The Red Army received orders to retreat to the last southern stronghold, Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. Sevastopol was not just a military base. It was a symbol, a wall against the Nazi advance. And for Lyudmila Pavlichenko, this place would become the stage of her definitive consecration. She fought there for more than 8 uninterrupted months, under conditions approaching the inhuman. Winter arrived with its icy mantle, bringing cold, hunger, and daily bombardments. Caves and trenches were her refuge, and the sky roared relentlessly. Yet she remained at her post, rifle in hand, observing, waiting, calculating. Her aim was so feared that the enemy began to refer to her with a nickname that sent chills down the spine: Lady Death. It was the enemy's involuntary acknowledgement, the seal of her effectiveness. Every time a German officer fell, every time a Nazi shooter failed to return, the rumor repeated, "It was Lady Death." The Nazi snipers then began hunting her. They knew her name, recognized her face. They considered her a trophy, a threat that had to be eliminated at any cost. But Lyudmila did not flee from danger. She accepted duels with the calm of someone who masters her craft. In one of these encounters, a 3-day duel against an elite German sniper, the tension was unbearable. Both waited, moved stealthily, measured every sound. For 3 days and nights, Lyudmila remained almost motionless, observing, measuring the wind, waiting for the enemy's mistake. Finally, when a slight shadow betrayed his position, she fired. The silence afterward was absolute. When she checked the fallen sniper's body, she discovered a chilling detail. Among his belongings, the man carried a photograph of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, marked with a red cross over her face. This was more than an attempt at intimidation. It was a confession. The enemy feared her, studied her, hunted her. And yet, he had failed. Each sniper duel was a mental battle, a game of nerves in which the mind mattered as much as the eye. A sniper does not shoot on impulse. They breathe, observe, listen to the silence. They know that one false move can mean death. In that invisible terrain of suspended time, Lyudmila was the absolute master. She controlled her breathing, conquered fear, eliminated trembling. She knew that hesitation meant death. By mid-1942, her official tally exceeded 309 confirmed kills, including 36 enemy snipers. Those numbers were proof of more than marksmanship. They were a symbol of an indomitable will. The Soviet High Command, impressed, recognized in her not only an exceptional soldier, but a symbol of the moral and psychological power of the Red Army. At a time when despair could break an army's morale, Lyudmila was a living reminder that victory was possible. She was promoted to lieutenant and awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military distinction a combatant could receive. It was recognition of her courage, tactical intelligence, and the calm with which she faced the war. But fate intervened once more. During the final defense of Sevastopol in June 1942, an enemy mortar exploded near her position. Shrapnel wounded her seriously. She was evacuated from the front, though she resisted. She did not want to abandon her comrades, did not want to leave her post. She begged to return, but the Soviet command refused. They could not risk their most famous heroine. Thus ended her war on the front. The hunter of enemies had to leave her telescopic sight and face a completely different war. The young woman who had spent almost a year viewing the world through a scope now had to adapt to another battlefield, that of politics, propaganda, and international diplomacy. Even before her full recovery, her name had already become a living legend. In Red Army camps and hospitals, her story was told quietly, almost like a prayer. "If Lyudmila could endure, so can we," said exhausted soldiers, clinging to her example like a talisman. Her rise as a national heroine marked the beginning of a new stage in her life. She had put down the rifle, but not the cause. The war continued raging, and now Lyudmila Pavlichenko had to fight with a new weapon: her voice. Can a single person change the course of a war? Perhaps not alone. But Lyudmila Pavlichenko proved that courage, when combined with a clear purpose, can inspire an entire nation. Her story was more than a military chronicle. It was a lesson in inner strength, conviction, and the power of a woman who, facing absolute chaos, chose never to retreat. Her combat style. Here we delve into the mind of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, not only to recount her victories, but to understand how every bullet, every shadow, and every minute of waiting in the mud transformed her way of thinking. Lyudmila was not just a sniper. She was a strategist who learned from every shot, every confrontation, every instant where death seemed to lurk mere inches away. From her first mission, she understood something fundamental. Shooting without purpose was wasting a Soviet life. In her first serious encounter, an enemy appeared unexpectedly behind a ruined building. Lyudmila held her breath, adjusted her sight, and waited. Each passing second reinforced her rule number one: do not shoot without purpose. She learned that patience was as deadly as her rifle, that every decision could mean the difference between survival and death. As the war progressed, so did her method. She learned to move as part of the terrain. Among the rubble of Odessa and the forests of Crimea, she covered herself with branches, earth, snow, even pieces of enemy uniforms. Amid intense firefights, dodging bullets and seeking cover, every calculated movement taught her another lesson. Never move without thinking. Every change of position, every moment of stillness strengthened her discipline, turning her into an undetectable shadow. Observation became her most loyal ally. As an enemy convoy passed slowly, Lyudmila studied its routines: the guards' steps, the sound of metal on snow, the shadows falling at the end of the day. She learned to anticipate movements before they happened, to use waiting as a silent weapon. This is how every battle taught her that patience was not weakness. It was power. Her Mosin-Nagant M1891/30 was heavy, rough, but in her hands, it became an extension of her mind. Between battles, she adjusted her scope with millimetric precision, cleaned the barrel, checked the alignment. Every enemy she killed reinforced her mantra: trust the weapon first, then yourself. She learned that a rushed shot could ruin the entire strategy, and that even calmness had to be trained like a muscle. The longest engagements also taught her about solitude and mental strength. Hours spent immobile under rain, snow, or scorching sun, with death lurking all around, gave her absolute mastery over her mind. In those prolonged silences, she turned fear into strategy, every heartbeat into calculation. She observed the enemy not as a person, but as a target. Every shot she fired saved her comrades and reinforced her conviction. Morale suspended on the battlefield, survival and efficiency were law. Every battle left a mark. She detected movement among 100 shadows, listened to the wind, the creak of wood, the echo of metal, and then acted. One shot, one less enemy, and another lesson learned. Calm does not come from instinct, but from study and practice. Lyudmila did not seek glory, she sought results. While others relied on reflexes, she relied on observation, and with each victory, she reinforced her rules, her principles, her own personal law on the battlefield. Her legacy did not remain only in marksmanship. Every battle taught her how to think before acting, how to use the environment, how to keep a steady mind when fear surrounded her. Her rifle was lethal, but Lyudmila Pavlichenko's will was the deadliest weapon of all. Every shot, every ambush, every silent victory became a chapter of her strategy, a lesson that would inspire generations of Soviet snipers. Power is not only in the scope, but in the mind that guides it. International impact and her diplomatic role. In 1942, after nearly a year on the front, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was withdrawn from combat. Her body was wounded, but her mind remained ready to fight. However, the war that awaited her was different. A war of words, symbols, and diplomacy. The Soviet High Command knew that Pavlichenko was more than a soldier. She was a message. At a time when the world doubted Europe's future, the Soviet Union needed a voice that personified the sacrifice of its people. And no one represented that spirit better than Lady Death. In September 1942, Lyudmila traveled to the United States as part of a Soviet delegation to strengthen the alliance with the Allies. She was the first Soviet citizen to be received at the White House during the war. There she met Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady of the United States, who was impressed by her firmness, intelligence, and serenity. In a country accustomed to seeing women far from the battlefield, Pavlichenko's presence had an immediate impact. A young woman in military uniform, medals on her chest, and a steely gaze, not as propaganda decoration, but as living proof that war had shattered all boundaries. In her first speech in Washington, journalists bombarded her with trivial questions. They wanted to know if she wore makeup, if she preferred skirts or pants, if she felt feminine wielding a rifle. Pavlichenko stopped them with a single phrase that became legendary. "I haven't had time to talk about that. I've been too busy killing Nazis." Her response traveled around the world. It was a statement of pride, equality, and resistance. Headlines changed. She was no longer just a Soviet sniper. She was the face of women's struggle against oppression. During her tour of the United States and Canada, Pavlichenko visited universities, factories, and military camps. At every encounter, she spoke simply, without embellishment or rhetoric. She said, "I do not come to ask for compassion. I come to ask for support. Every day you hesitate, our children die." Her speeches inspired empathy and respect. The press, initially curious, ended up admiring her. Even Woody Guthrie, the legendary American singer-songwriter, dedicated a song to her, Miss Pavlichenko, a popular anthem that immortalized her as a symbol of courage and dignity. For the first time, a Soviet hero was celebrated in the heart of America. In times of distrust and propaganda, she achieved something few diplomats could, inspiring mutual respect among peoples ideologically opposed but allied by necessity. After her North American tour, Lyudmila visited the United Kingdom. There she was received by Winston Churchill and honored as one of the most significant military figures of the Eastern Front. In her lectures, she consistently emphasized one message. War was not only for men, and courage had no gender or border. Her presence in London, still under the echo of bombings, served as a reminder of human resilience. If the Soviets can resist in Sevastopol, we can resist at home, declared the British press. But being a symbol has a price. Pavlichenko, who had lived in mud and gunpowder, now had to wear formal suits, smile for cameras, and repeat speeches. Deep down, she was still a soldier. Every round of applause reminded her of the faces of her fallen comrades. In her memoirs, she wrote that those tours were harder than the front. On the battlefield, at least I knew where the enemy was. Still, she accomplished her mission. She achieved what no general could: awaken international support, show the human face of Soviet sacrifice, and demonstrate that female courage was not an exception, but an example. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had exchanged her rifle for a microphone, but her message remained the same: defend life, resist tyranny, and never forget the price of freedom. In the corridors of power, her figure was respected and remembered as what she truly was: a warrior who knew how to speak on behalf of those who could no longer do so. Her future and the challenges that awaited her. When the war ended in 1945, Lyudmila Pavlichenko was barely 29 years old. She had survived hell, faced the best snipers of the German army, and traveled halfway across the world as a symbol of Soviet valor. But the war, though over on the maps, continued within her. The physical wounds healed. The emotional ones, not so much. Like many veterans of the front, Pavlichenko carried the shadows of war, memories of fallen comrades, the sound of gunfire, the faces that disappeared in the scope of her rifle. She never returned to the front. Instead, she began a new battle, that of educating and remembering. Lyudmila was appointed as a military instructor and advisor for the Red Army, dedicated to training new generations of Soviet snipers. Her experience was essential for the Army's tactical training in the post-war years, especially in camouflage techniques and long-distance accuracy. She also worked in the War Veterans Association, where she became a respected voice in keeping the memory of those who did not return alive. There, far from the roar of combat, she understood that true victory was preserving history without forgetting the human cost. In the 1950s and 1960s, Pavlichenko found refuge in writing and teaching. She published her war memoirs, a raw and honest testimony that remains a reference for military historians today. In them, she did not present herself as a heroine, but as a woman who fulfilled her duty. A woman who, in her own words, learned not to fear death, but never stopped fearing oblivion. She did not remarry. Her great love, a Soviet officer she met during the defense of Sevastopol, died in combat. From then on, her personal life remained marked by absence. During Victory Day parades, she could be seen walking among much younger veterans with her uniform impeccable and her face serene, yet with the gaze of someone still looking through an invisible telescopic sight. Over time, history began to recognize her beyond the myth. She was awarded the Order of Lenin, received the title Hero of the Soviet Union, the country's highest military distinction, and her name was inscribed in schools, museums, and monuments throughout the Soviet territory. In Ukraine, her homeland, she is remembered as one of the most important female figures in modern history. A young woman who not only broke records on the battlefield, but also paved the way for generations of women who understood that courage does not depend on gender, but on spirit. Lyudmila Pavlichenko passed away in 1974 at the age of 58. Her funeral was quiet, attended by veterans, family members, and former students. No bullets were fired that day. but millions of memories accompanied her. Today, her story remains alive. In every woman breaking barriers, in every soldier who looks to the horizon and remembers that war is not only fought with weapons, but with conviction. In every student who learns that one life can change the fate of a nation. Lyudmila Pavlichenko did not seek fame. She did not fight for glory or revenge. She fought for her land, for her people, and to show that human courage has no face, uniform, or gender. More than 300 enemies fell before her sight. But her greatest victory was reminding the world that even in the darkness of war, the light of dignity can shine. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was not simply the deadliest sniper of World War II. She was a force of nature, a symbol of discipline, intelligence, and courage that transcended the battlefield. Every shot, every hour spent motionless in the mud, every calculated strategy revealed not only her skill, but her extraordinary ability to transform fear into decision and tension into absolute control. Her life shows us that true bravery is not measured in medals or titles, but in the silent strength of those who, facing the most extreme adversity, choose to act with clarity and determination. Lyudmila taught that courage has a human face, and that even a single person can change the fate of many. Today, her example lives on in soldiers, historians, students, and all those who seek inspiration in the darkest corners of history. She reminds us that bravery knows no gender, age, or circumstance. It only knows conviction. Lyudmila Pavlichenko is a testament to the fact that the mind, training, and discipline can turn an ordinary human into a legend, and that resilience in the face of adversity can leave a mark far more lasting than any weapon. She represents the generation of women who defied the expectations of their time and changed the course of history through their intellect, sacrifice, and unwavering willpower. Her legacy goes beyond the battlefields of World War II. She teaches us that even in the darkest moments, strategy, patience, and conviction can transform despair into victory, and that every choice we make can define not only our destiny, but that of those around us. Every Soviet female sniper who followed in her footsteps, every story of silent heroism that emerged behind the Eastern Front, carries a piece of Lyudmila within them, reminding us that history is not always written by the powerful, but by those who have the courage to act when all seems lost. If you want to discover more about these real stories of heroism, bravery, and strategy, and learn how women like Lyudmila redefined World War II, you cannot miss our video about the Soviet female snipers who left their indelible mark on the Eastern Front. Click now and join us in exploring the courage, discipline, and humanity that transformed history and continue to inspire entire generations. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment on which story impacted you the most. Your support allows us to continue rescuing and sharing stories that deserve to be remembered, so that the legacy of heroes like Lyudmila Pavlichenko is never lost and continues inspiring those who believe in the power of their own ideals. Because if Lyudmila taught us anything, it is that even in times of war, history can be written by those who do not fear destiny.